The crystal chandeliers of Thornfield Manor cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Lady Eleanor Ashworth stood frozen in the doorway, her pale blue gown trembling with each shallow breath. Every eye in the grand ballroom turned toward her, but not with the admiration typically reserved for a bride. No, these gazes held something far crueler, pity mixed with barely concealed amusement. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "The spare bride," someone murmured, loud enough for Eleanor to hear. How convenient that she was already dressed for the occasion. The words cut deeper than any blade could have. Just 3 hours ago, Eleanor had been preparing to attend her younger sister's wedding as the maid of honor. Now, she stood in the entrance as the replacement bride, thrust into a marriage meant for another. Her sister Victoria had fled in the night with a traveling merchant, leaving behind only a hastily scrawled note and a family on the brink of social and financial ruin. Lord Ashworth, Eleanor's father, had given her no choice. The marriage contract with the Duke of Ravenswood was binding, and the penalty for breaking it would destroy their family. If Victoria wouldn't honor the agreement, then Eleanor must. She had exactly 1 hour to transform from supportive sister to sacrificial bride. Before you hear what happens next, if you're enjoying this story of unexpected love and courage, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support means everything, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt like the overlooked one in your family? Share your story. I read every single comment. The Duke of Ravenswood stood at the altar, his jaw clenched so tightly that a muscle ticked visibly beneath his skin. Alexander Blackwood was not a man accustomed to humiliation, yet here he stood, abandoned by his bride before 300 of society's most influential members. His dark eyes, the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes, fixed on Eleanor as she began her solitary walk down the aisle. Eleanor had always been invisible next to Victoria. Where her sister was golden sunshine and tinkling laughter, Eleanor was quiet moonlight and thoughtful silence. Victoria's beauty was the kind that demanded attention. Bright blue eyes, golden curls, and a figure that made men write terrible poetry. Eleanor possessed a different sort of beauty, one that required a second look to appreciate. Her dark hair was always simply styled, her gray eyes held depths that few bothered to explore, and her figure, while pleasing, was often hidden beneath modest gowns chosen to never outshine her sister. The walk to the altar felt eternal. Each step echoed in the hushed ballroom, accompanied by the rustle of silk and the weight of hundreds of judging stares. Eleanor heard every cutting remark, every cruel observation. Poor thing, she must be devastated to get a husband this way. Second choice for everything, even marriage. The Duke deserves better than a substitute. But Eleanor held her head high, her spine straight as a sword. She had spent 23 years being overlooked, underestimated, and undervalued. She had managed the household while Victoria attended parties. She had balanced the books while her sister spent freely. She had held her father's estate together with her bare hands while everyone praised Victoria's charm. If they thought her weak because she was second choice, they would learn otherwise. The Duke's expression remained unreadable as she approached. Alexander Blackwood was 32 years old and had inherited his title 5 years prior. He was known for 3 things: his vast wealth, his military service that left him with a pronounced limp, and his complete disinterest in society's marriage mart. The union with Victoria had been arranged by their fathers years ago, a business transaction dressed in wedding clothes. When Eleanor finally reached the altar, she dared to meet his gaze. What she saw there surprised her, not anger or disgust, but a flicker of something that might have been curiosity. He extended his hand, and she placed her trembling fingers in his palm. His grip was firm, warm, and strangely reassuring. "Your Grace," she whispered, dropping into a curtsy. "Lady Eleanor," he replied, his voice deep as distant thunder. Then, louder, addressing the crowd, "It seems we have all been victims of a grave misunderstanding." The guests leaned forward, hungry for drama. Eleanor's heart plummeted. Of course, he would reject her publicly. How foolish to think I must confess, the Duke continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom, that while the name on the marriage contract may have read Victoria, it was always Eleanor I intended to marry. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eleanor's eyes widened in shock. What game was he playing? Alexander turned to face her fully, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You see, I've spent the last year observing the Ashworth family. I've watched one daughter flit from party to party, like a butterfly, beautiful but insubstantial. And I've watched another manage an estate, care for tenants, and display a strength of character that would make any man proud to call her his duchess. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, the gesture both proper and somehow intimate. Lady Victoria may have fled, but she did me the greatest favor of my life. She gave me the opportunity to marry the sister I've admired from afar, the one who reads poetry by candlelight when she thinks no one is watching, who secretly pays the doctor's bills for sick tenants, who can calculate estate finances faster than my own steward. Eleanor's mind reeled. He had noticed her? All those times she'd thought herself invisible. He had been watching? So no, Alexander declared, his voice ringing with authority. Lady Eleanor is not the spare bride. She is not second choice. She is my only choice, and I would have found a way to marry her regardless of contracts or family obligations. That she comes to me now, displaying the courage to save her family at personal cost, only confirms what I already knew. She will make a magnificent Duchess of Ravenswood. The ballroom erupted in whispers, but Alexander wasn't finished. He turned to the minister. Proceed with the ceremony, Reverend. I'm eager to make this remarkable woman my wife. What followed was a wedding unlike any Eleanor had imagined. Where she had expected cold duty, she found unexpected warmth. When Alexander spoke his vows, his voice held a sincerity that made her heart race. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that somehow suited her perfectly, his touch lingered. But it was during the kiss that sealed their union that everything changed. Alexander cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheek. Trust me, he whispered, so softly only she could hear. Then his lips met hers, and the world exploded into sensation. This was no perfunctory peck to satisfy convention. This was a claiming, a promise, a declaration that left Eleanor breathless, and the wedding guests scandalized. When they parted, Eleanor saw the truth in his eyes. This was no mere gallantry to save her from humiliation. The heat in his gaze, the way his hands reluctantly released her, the Duke of Ravenswood truly wanted her. If you're loving this unexpected twist, please drop a comment below. What would you have done in Eleanor's situation? And don't forget to subscribe for more historical romance stories that will sweep you off your feet. The wedding breakfast was a blur of congratulations and thinly veiled curiosity. Eleanor found herself the center of attention for the first time in her life, but it wasn't the uncomfortable scrutiny she'd feared. With Alexander at her side, his hand possessively resting on the small of her back, she felt protected, cherished even. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton, society's greatest gossip, approached with predatory interest. Such a romantic revelation. To think you've been harboring feelings for Lady Eleanor all this time. Why didn't you speak sooner? Alexander's smile was sharp as a blade. Would you have me insult Lord Ashworth by rejecting the daughter he offered? I am many things, Lady Pemberton, but I am not without honor. I would have fulfilled the contract regardless. That fate has given me the bride I truly wanted is merely fortunate. Throughout the afternoon, Eleanor began to see her new husband more clearly. His limp, which society whispered made him less of a man, seemed to disappear when he was focused on her. The scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from the war, added character to his undeniably handsome face. But it was his mind that truly captivated her, sharp, witty, and surprisingly kind. You're very good at this, Eleanor murmured during a brief moment alone. At what, Duchess? The title on his lips sent an unexpected thrill through her. Pretending, making them believe this was all planned. His expression grew serious. Who says I'm pretending? Before she could respond, they were interrupted by her father, Lord Ashworth, who had spent the reception accepting congratulations as if he'd orchestrated the entire affair. Ravenswood, a word? Eleanor watched nervously as the two men stepped aside. Her father's face was flushed with drink and relief, but there was calculation in his eyes that made her stomach twist. "You've saved our family from scandal," Lord Ashworth said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Victoria's foolishness could have ruined us, but you've turned it into a triumph. Of course, Eleanor isn't quite the beauty her sister was, but she's biddable enough. She'll give you heirs and won't cause trouble." The muscle in Alexander's jaw ticked again. "Lord Ashworth, let me be perfectly clear. Your daughter, my wife, is worth 10 of Victoria. Her beauty is the kind that grows more apparent with each passing day, unlike the fleeting prettiness that fades with age. Her intelligence surpasses that of most men I know, including, frankly, yourself. And if I hear you diminish her again, you'll find yourself unwelcome at Ravenswood Castle." Lord Ashworth paled. "I meant no offense. Yet you gave it nonetheless." Alexander's voice was ice. "Eleanor has spent her life being undervalued by those who should have treasured her most. That ends today. She is the Duchess of Ravenswood now, and she will receive the respect that title demands. From everyone, including her family." Eleanor, who had drawn close enough to hear the exchange, felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever defended her so fiercely. The carriage ride to Ravenswood Castle was quiet, the events of the day settling over them like a heavy blanket. Eleanor stared out the window, trying to process how her life had changed so dramatically. This morning she had been invisible Eleanor Ashworth, resigned to spinsterhood. Now she was a duchess, married to a man who claimed to have chosen her above all others. "You're very quiet," Alexander observed. "I'm trying to understand why you did it," Eleanor admitted. "What you said during the ceremony, was any of it true?" Alexander shifted in his seat, his bad leg clearly paining him after the long day. Without thinking, Eleanor moved closer, adjusting a cushion to support him better. His eyes widened at the gesture. "Every word," he said softly, "though I admit I didn't plan to reveal it quite so dramatically. But why didn't you say anything before? Why agree to marry Victoria if you preferred me?" A rueful smile crossed his face. "Because I'm a fool who thought duty came before desire. Your father approached mine about the match when Victoria was 17. By the time I returned from the war and actually met your family, the contracts were signed. I told myself it didn't matter which daughter I married. It was just business." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "Then I met you. You were reading in the garden, completely absorbed in some tome about agricultural improvements. When you noticed me watching, you blushed and apologized for boring me. But when I asked about the book, your eyes lit up. You spent an hour explaining crop rotation with such passion that I found myself utterly enchanted." Eleanor remembered that day. She'd been mortified, certain she'd bored the handsome Duke to tears with her rambling. "You were just being polite." "I was being fascinated," he corrected. Every interaction after that only confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. I was engaged to the wrong sister. But honor bound me to the agreement. I couldn't shame Victoria by crying off, and I certainly couldn't insult your family by suggesting a switch. So, you would have married her? Even loving?" Eleanor caught herself, heat flooding her cheeks. "Even loving you?" Alexander finished gently. "Yes. I would have done my duty and made myself miserable in the process. Victoria's flight, while painful in the moment, was a gift I didn't deserve." The carriage rolled through massive iron gates, and Eleanor got her first glimpse of her new home. Ravenswood Castle rose from the mist like something from a fairy tale, all soaring towers and ancient stone. It was magnificent and intimidating in equal measure. "Welcome home, Duchess," Alexander said, and Eleanor heard the pride in his voice. The household staff was assembled in the great hall, a sea of curious faces eager to meet their new mistress. Eleanor's nerves, which had been surprisingly calm during the wedding, suddenly made themselves known. These people had expected Victoria. Beautiful, charming Victoria who knew how to make everyone love her. But as Alexander introduced her, Eleanor saw something unexpected in their faces. Relief? Approval? The housekeeper, Mrs. Morrison, stepped forward with a warm smile. Your Grace, welcome to Ravenswood. His Grace sent word ahead about the change in circumstances. We've prepared the Duchess's chambers, and I'm at your disposal for anything you might need. Thank you, Mrs. Morrison, Eleanor replied, grateful her voice remained steady. I look forward to learning about the household. Perhaps we could meet tomorrow to discuss the routines? The housekeeper's smile widened. Of course, Your Grace. If I may say, we're all quite pleased to have a mistress who takes an interest in such matters. As the staff dispersed, Alexander leaned close. They adore you already. They don't even know me. They know you asked about household routines instead of demanding to redecorate everything in pink. His tone was teasing, but Eleanor heard the underlying message. The staff had been dreading Victoria. Want to know what happens next in Eleanor's first night as a Duchess? Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. This story is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss the romantic moments coming up. Comment below if you think Alexander truly loved Eleanor all along, or if you think there's more to his story. The Duchess's chambers were magnificent, a sitting room decorated in soft blues and creams, a dressing room larger than her entire bedroom at home, and a bedchamber dominated by a massive four-poster bed. Eleanor tried not to think about that bed and what was expected to happen in it. These rooms connect to mine, Alexander said, gesturing to a door in the far wall. But I want to be clear, I will never enter without your permission. This marriage may have begun unusually, but I intend to court you properly. Eleanor turned to face him, surprised. Court me? We're already married. A technicality, he said with a slight smile. You deserve to be wooed, to be won. You deserve to choose me as much as I've chosen you. And if I don't, the question slipped out before she could stop it. His expression grew serious. Then we'll have a marriage in name only, and you'll want for nothing. But I hope. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, a mixture of sandalwood and something uniquely him. I very much hope you'll give me a chance to prove that fate knew what it was doing when it brought us together. Eleanor's heart raced. This morning she had resigned herself to a loveless marriage with a man who didn't want her. Now she stood before a husband who claimed to have wanted her all along, who spoke of courtship and choice. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll have dinner with me tomorrow night. Just the two of us. Say you'll let me show you the library. It's my favorite room in the castle, and I think it will be yours too. Say you'll give us time to know each other, as husband and wife should. Eleanor found herself nodding. Yes, I'd like that. Alexander's smile transformed his face, making him look years younger. He lifted her hand to his lips again, the gesture becoming familiar already. Sleep well, Eleanor. Tomorrow begins our real story. After he left through the connecting door, Eleanor sank onto the bed, her mind whirling. Her lady's maid, a cheerful girl named Mary, appeared to help her prepare for bed. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, Mary said as she helped Eleanor out of the wedding gown, but the whole staff is buzzing about what His Grace said at the wedding. Is it true he's been sweet on you all this time? Eleanor blushed. It seems so, though I can hardly believe it myself. Oh, it's true all right, Mary said confidently. Mrs. Morrison says His Grace asked dozens of questions about you whenever he visited. What you liked to read, how you took your tea, what flowers you preferred. We all thought it was odd, him being engaged to Lady Victoria and all, but now it makes perfect sense. This revelation kept Eleanor awake long into the night. Had Alexander truly been watching her, learning about her, falling in love with her while bound to marry her sister? The thought was thrilling and heartbreaking in equal measure. The next morning, Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the reality of her new life. She was a duchess. She had a husband who claimed to love her. She had a castle to run and a position in society that would have seemed impossible just yesterday. Mary appeared with breakfast and a message. His Grace sends his compliments and asks if you'd like to tour the estate with him this morning. He says to dress warmly and wear comfortable shoes. Eleanor smiled at the thoughtfulness. Victoria would have expected a carriage tour. Alexander already knew Eleanor would prefer to walk, to see everything up close. She dressed in a practical wool dress and sturdy boots, pinning her hair in a simple style that wouldn't be mussed by the wind. When she met Alexander in the entrance hall, his eyes lit up with approval. "You look perfect," he said, offering his arm. "Ready to see your domain?" The tour was a revelation. Alexander didn't just show her the grounds, he introduced her to the heart of Ravenswood. They visited the tenant farmers, where Eleanor's knowledge of agriculture sparked animated discussions. They toured the village, where the Duke's genuine affection for his people was evident in every interaction. They explored the vast gardens, and Alexander revealed his secret passion for rose cultivation. "I started it during my recovery," he admitted, showing her a section of rare varieties. "The physician said I'd never walk again. Working with the roses, creating something beautiful from nothing, gave me purpose. This one," he indicated a stunning deep red bloom, "I cultivated myself. I haven't named it yet." "It's beautiful," Eleanor breathed, touching the velvety petals gently. "I'd like to name it for you, if you'll permit me. The Eleanor Rose, though it pales in comparison to its namesake." Eleanor blushed deeply. "You're very smooth with words for a soldier." "Former soldier," he corrected with a grin. "Now I'm just a besotted husband trying to impress his wife." As they walked back to the castle, Eleanor noticed his limp was more pronounced. Without thinking, she slowed her pace and shifted closer, offering subtle support. Alexander looked down at her with such tenderness it made her breath catch. "This is why," he said softly. "Why what?" "Why I fell in love with you. You see what others miss. You care without making a fuss. You're extraordinary, Eleanor, and the fact that you don't realize it makes you even more so." That evening, they dined alone as promised. The formal dining room had been abandoned in favor of a cozy parlor where they could sit close and talk freely. Alexander regaled her with stories of his military service, glossing over the harsh realities, but sharing enough for Eleanor to understand the man he'd become. "Is that how you hurt your leg?" she asked gently. His hand unconsciously moved to his thigh. "Cavalry charge gone wrong. My horse was shot from under me." The leg was crushed beneath him. "The surgeons wanted to amputate, but I was too stubborn to let them." "I'm glad you were stubborn," Eleanor said firmly. "Though I'm sorry you suffered. It brought me home," Alexander said simply. "To you. I'd suffer it again for that gift." After dinner, he showed her the library as promised. Eleanor gasped at the sight. 3 stories of books, rolling ladders, comfortable reading nooks, and windows that flooded the space with light. "It's paradise," she breathed. "It's yours," Alexander said. "Everything I have is yours, Eleanor. But this room, I thought of you when I had it renovated last year. Every book I acquired, I wondered if you'd enjoy it." Eleanor turned to face him, overwhelmed. "Why are you so good to me? Yesterday, I was nobody, the forgotten daughter, the spare bride. Why do you treat me like I'm precious?" Alexander cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Because you are precious. Because everyone else was too blind to see it doesn't diminish your worth. You've spent your life giving, to your family, to your tenants, to everyone but yourself. Let me give to you now. Let me show you how it feels to be treasured." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, asking nothing but offering everything. Eleanor melted into him, her hands clutching his jacket as emotions overwhelmed her. When they parted, both were breathless. "I should go," Alexander said roughly. "I promised to court you properly." "Stay," Eleanor whispered. I've been alone so long. I don't want to be alone tonight." They settled onto a sofa before the fire, Eleanor tucked against Alexander's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. They talked for hours, about books, about dreams, about fears and hopes, and everything in between. Eleanor learned that the intimidating Duke was actually a romantic who read poetry, that he'd been terrified she'd reject him, that he'd already written to her sister thanking her for setting them both free. "You wrote to Victoria?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "A very short note," Alexander admitted. "I wished her well with her merchant and thanked her for having the courage neither of us possessed, to choose love over duty." As the fire burned low, Eleanor found herself drowsing against her husband's shoulder, more content than she'd ever been. "Alexander," she murmured. "Yes, love. I think I'm falling in love with you." His arms tightened around her. "Thank God," he breathed, "because I'm already hopelessly lost to you." If this story is touching your heart, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Have you ever felt overlooked only to discover someone saw your true worth all along? Don't forget to subscribe for more beautiful historical romances. The first month of their marriage passed in a blur of happiness. Eleanor threw herself into her role as Duchess with enthusiasm, winning over the household staff with her practical approach and genuine interest in their welfare. She implemented improvements to the tenant housing, started a school for the village children, and transformed the castle's neglected conservatory into a thriving botanical haven. Alexander watched his wife bloom with pride and ever-deepening love. Gone was the shadow who hid behind her sister. In her place stood a confident woman who commanded respect through kindness and competence rather than demands and drama. But their happiness was tested when news arrived that Victoria had returned to England. Her merchant had abandoned her in Paris, taking what little money she'd had. Lord Ashworth, still stinging from Alexander's earlier rebuke, refused to take her back. In desperation, she'd written to Eleanor begging for help. "She's your sister," Alexander said carefully as Eleanor read the letter with trembling hands. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Eleanor looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "Part of me wants to ignore her. She left me to face humiliation, to save our family's honor while she chased her own desires. But she's still your sister," Alexander finished. "And you're too good to let her suffer, no matter what she's done." Eleanor nodded. Could she stay here? Just until she finds her feet. Alexander pulled his wife into his arms. "Of course. But Eleanor, I need you to promise me something. Don't let her diminish you. Don't go back to being invisible. You're the Duchess of Ravenswood, my beloved wife, and nothing she says or does can change that." Victoria arrived on a rainy Tuesday, looking wan and travel-worn. The golden beauty who'd fled on her wedding day was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed woman who'd learned hard lessons about the world. "Eleanor," she said, her voice small, "I'm so sorry. I never meant." "Come inside," Eleanor interrupted gently. "You look exhausted." Over tea, Victoria poured out her story. The merchant had been a fortune hunter, interested only in what he thought she'd bring to the marriage. When he discovered Lord Ashworth had cut her off, he'd abandoned her without a second thought. "I was such a fool," Victoria wept. "I had everything. A duke who wanted to marry me, a secure future, our family's honor intact. And I threw it all away for pretty words and false promises." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Alexander, who joined them despite Victoria's obvious discomfort in his presence. "Actually," Eleanor said slowly, "you did us both a favor." Victoria looked up, confused. "What?" Alexander took Eleanor's hand. "Your sister and I are very happily married. As it turns out, she was always the bride I wanted. Your leaving gave us the chance to find each other." For the first time in her life, Eleanor saw envy in Victoria's eyes. Not for the title or the castle or the wealth, but for the obvious love between Eleanor and her husband. "You love each other," Victoria said wonderingly. "Really love each other?" "Very much," Eleanor confirmed. "So, you see, everything worked out as it should." Victoria stayed for 3 months, during which time she witnessed the life she might have had. But more importantly, she saw her sister truly happy for the first time. Eleanor didn't rub her success in Victoria's face. Instead, she helped her sister find her own path. "You are always better at managing things than me," Victoria admitted one evening as they walked in the garden. "I just wanted parties and pretty dresses and attention. You wanted to make a difference." "We're different people," Eleanor said diplomatically. "That doesn't make either of us better or worse." "Yes, it does," Victoria insisted. "You're better. You always were. I just made sure no one noticed." The admission hung between them, years of hurt finally acknowledged. "Why?" Eleanor asked simply. "Because I was jealous," Victoria said, tears falling freely. You were smarter, kinder, more capable. The only thing I had was beauty, and I knew that would fade. So I made sure everyone saw only that, made sure you stayed in my shadow where you couldn't outshine me. Eleanor pulled her sister into a hug. Oh, Victoria. We could have been friends. Real sisters, not competitors. Can we start now? Victoria asked hopefully. I know I don't deserve it, but could we try? They did try, and slowly, a new relationship formed. Victoria eventually found purpose helping Eleanor with her charitable works, discovering she had a gift for organizing fundraising events. She met a kind vicar who saw past her beauty to the woman underneath, and their courtship was slow and genuine. I'm proud of you, Eleanor told her sister the day Victoria's engagement was announced. You're choosing love and partnership over status and wealth. I learned from the best, Victoria replied, smiling at Eleanor and Alexander. You two showed me what real love looks like. The great test of Eleanor and Alexander's marriage came 2 years later when Eleanor struggled to conceive. Month after month passed with no sign of a child, and whispers began circulating through society. A duke needed an heir, after all. Perhaps, Eleanor said one night, her voice breaking, perhaps you should have married Victoria after all. She might have given you children by now. Alexander pulled her fiercely against him. Don't, he commanded. Don't you dare suggest I'd trade you for a dozen heirs. You are my heart, Eleanor. Children would be a blessing, but you are my miracle. But your duty. My duty is to love you, protect you, cherish you. I have cousins who can inherit if needed, but I will not have you doubting your worth because of something beyond our control. His steadfast love sustained her through the difficult months that followed. When well-meaning matrons offered advice or criticized, Alexander shielded her. When Lord Ashworth made crude comments about her failure to produce an heir, Alexander banned him from Ravenswood entirely. You are enough, he told her every night. You will always be enough. Then, just when Eleanor had made peace with the possibility of childlessness, she discovered she was pregnant. The joy on Alexander's face when she told him was surpassed only by his terror for her safety. I can't lose you, he confessed, his hands trembling as they cradled her still flat stomach. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll fight to stay with me. I promise, Eleanor vowed. We've overcome too much to be separated now. If you've been touched by Eleanor and Alexander's journey, please subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are enough, just as they are. Drop a comment below about a time when someone saw your true worth. The pregnancy was difficult, but Eleanor faced it with the same quiet strength she'd shown all her life. Alexander hovered anxiously, driving the household mad with his protective instincts. But when their daughter was born, healthy, perfect, with Eleanor's dark hair and Alexander's storm-cloud eyes, every moment of worry was forgotten. She's beautiful, Alexander breathed, cradling his daughter while tears streamed down his face. Just like her mother. What shall we name her? Eleanor asked, exhausted but radiant. Hope, Alexander said firmly. Because that's what you gave me, my darling. Hope that love could overcome duty, that second chances were possible, that the spare bride could become the only woman I'd ever want. They went on to have 3 more children, 2 boys and another girl, each one loved and cherished. Eleanor proved to be as magnificent a mother as she was a duchess, raising children who were confident without being arrogant, kind without being weak. Years later, at their eldest daughter's wedding, Eleanor overheard 2 matrons gossiping. Isn't it romantic how the Duke of Ravenswood fell in love with his wife at first sight? One said. Oh yes, the other agreed. Though I heard she was originally the second choice. Her sister ran off, you know. Eleanor felt Alexander's hand slip into hers. Shall I correct them? He murmured, still ready to defend her after all these years. No, Eleanor said, smiling up at him. Let them think what they will. We know the truth. And what's that? He asked, though his eyes showed he already knew the answer. That sometimes what looks like second choice is actually destiny in disguise. That being overlooked can be a gift if it means the right person finally sees you. that the spare bride might just be the one who was meant to wear the crown all along. Alexander kissed her temple, uncaring of the shocked gasps from the matrons. "My darling Eleanor, never spare, never second. Always first in my heart, now and forever." As Eleanor watched her daughter dance with her new husband, a love match, not an arrangement, she reflected on the twisting path that had brought her here. That desperate morning when she'd stood in for her runaway sister seemed like a lifetime ago. The frightened girl who'd walked down the aisle as a replacement had transformed into a woman who knew her worth. "Grandmother," her youngest grandchild tugged at her skirts. "Tell us the story of how you met grandfather again." Eleanor smiled, settling into her chair with the child on her lap, other grandchildren gathering around. Alexander joined them, his hair silver now, but his eyes still warm when they looked at her. "Well," Eleanor began, "once upon a time, there was a girl who thought she was invisible. But she wasn't really invisible, was she, grandfather?" Another grandchild interrupted. "No," Alexander said, his voice rich with love even after 30 years of marriage. "She was the brightest light in any room. Some people were just too foolish to see it. But I saw her. I always saw her." "And then what happened?" The children chorused, though they knew the story by heart. "Then," Eleanor continued, "she learned the most important lesson of all, that your worth doesn't come from being chosen first or being the most beautiful or the most charming. It comes from being authentically yourself, from having the courage to face challenges, from choosing love over fear. And from knowing that sometimes," Alexander added, pulling Eleanor close, "what seems like misfortune is actually the greatest blessing in disguise. Because if Victoria hadn't run away, I might have spent my whole life married to the wrong sister, never knowing that my true love was right there all along." "That's beautiful, grandmother," the eldest grandchild sighed. "No, darling," Eleanor corrected gently. "It's real. Real love isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's messy and complicated and arrives in unexpected ways. But when you find it, when you find someone who sees your true worth, who chooses you not because they have to but because they can't imagine choosing anyone else, then you hold on tight and never let go." As the sun set over Ravenswood Castle, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Eleanor looked around at her family, her children, her grandchildren, her beloved Alexander, and knew that every moment of doubt, every cutting remark about being the spare bride, had been worth it. She had been second choice. She had been overlooked and undervalued. But in the end, she had become so much more. A beloved wife, a respected duchess, a devoted mother, a force for good in her community. Most importantly, she had become herself, not a shadow of her prettier sister, not a replacement bride, but Eleanor, wonderful and worthy in her own right. The spare bride had become the love of the Duke's life. The invisible girl had become impossible to ignore. The second choice had proven to be the only choice that mattered. And they lived, as all the best love stories promise, happily ever after. But their story teaches us something vital. Never let anyone make you feel like you're second best. Never believe that being overlooked means being unworthy. Sometimes the most beautiful flowers bloom in the shadows, waiting for the right person to notice their beauty. Sometimes what feels like rejection is really redirection towards something better. And sometimes, just sometimes, being the spare means you were being saved for someone who would recognize you as the treasure you've always been. Thank you so much for joining me on Eleanor and Alexander's beautiful journey. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another romantic tale. Share this video with anyone who needs to remember their worth. And please, leave a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt like the overlooked one who found their happiness? What did you think of Eleanor's transformation? Remember, you are not spare. You are not second choice. You are worthy of a love that sees you, chooses you, and celebrates you every single day. Until next time, keep believing in love, keep believing in yourself, and never forget, sometimes the best chapters of our lives begin when we least expect them.